Mob Ballet was really, really blessed to be granted with the Knight Foundation grant for this project in Stone Rose. And that enabled me and my skeleton team to really create something beautiful and I think full-bodied, in a way that without funding would not have been possible. So Mob Ballet is a digital platform where we curate, we present, promote, and preserve the contributions of blacks in ballet around the world. So Encilla Rose is the legacy of, or the beginning of the legacy of black Philadelphians in ballet. I am from Philadelphia. I am a black ballet dancer. I started at the Philadelphia School for Dance Arts with we call her Aunt Joan. When Ms. Ramos from the Knight Foundation asked me, what would you do? We grant in these cities, what would you do? I saw Philadelphia and I knew exactly what I would do because I knew that I had a personal legacy that maybe other people didn't know that much about or I wanted to share. So I knew that I studied with Marion Sujet, and when I was 8 years old, she told my father, take her to Pennsylvania Ballet because she could be a ballet dancer. And that's what happened, right? I knew that Judith Jamison was also from Philadelphia and had started in ballet and then got diverted into a fabulous career. I mean, if we could all have that diversion, right? But she started in ballet with Marion Sujet. I knew that Joan Myers Brown had studied ballet with Sidney King. And I said, you know what? There's more there. Also, I'd like to, I can't really see, but a dear friend of mine and former Dancing of Harlem dancer, ballerina, is here, Dr. Joselli Deans, Aldine Deans. Is that you? She was also one of the people that had, her dissertation was exactly on black ballerinas. And she was so generous as to share her information, her knowledge, her passion with me and with the project. So she's a huge part of this. And it's great because we are family in a lot of different ways. So I'm not gonna do like the whole long bio thing because I really, A, want you to engage with the site and get more information. And B, we have them here, and I want them to tell you who they are. Joan Myers Brown needs probably no introduction in Philadelphia. She is the founder and the director of the Philadelphia School of Dance Arts, as well as Philadanco, Philadelphia Dance Company. Miss Dolores Brown, a silent E, is one of our first black ballerinas. She's a member of the New York Negro Ballet, yes, and now Judith Jamison cannot be with us today. But I have another Judy for you. And this one you weren't expecting. I have Judy Sujet, who is the daughter of Miss Marion Sujet. Okay, so this is how this is going to go down. This is a discussion. So we want to talk, we want to hear your stories, but I really do encourage you as audience members to participate. If you have a question, can we get a little light in the house so we can see? If you have something to say, we have some black ballet dancers in the house. I'll call you out in a moment, don't get nervous now. But I really do want you to participate and ask questions. I'm close to this, but if you want to know something, ask. One of the things, first of all, you've had an opportunity to see the installation. What are some of your feelings? Oh God, I've opened myself up.
Tweaking, but I think you're on the right track and I'm quite proud of it.
Thank you. Ms. Brown.
Brown.
I'm not very good at the electronics. And when you linked me up, or whatever the phrases are, on your email, I was so happy to see, first of all, the tree. And to see Miss Marion and Essie, and because I got to luckily work with Essie several different times. Wonderful. stories about her. And Miss Sidney and Joan and Julie Anderson. I just love the layout. I think you're really on the right track.
And Essie is
Marion's teacher.
Essie Marie Dorsey,
Yeah.
who really is the seed that sort of began the tree that we're talking about. One of the things that really intrigued me was the idea of, at this period of time, we're talking about the 40s, late 30s, 40s, the idea that segregation, how segregation worked or how it didn't work. Like when you told me that you went to mixed schools, I was like, what? Because we think that Brown versus the Board of Education was in what, 1952?
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the Philadelphia of that time, like the racial workings?
I can talk a little, excuse me. It had to do with where you lived in the city. It was more geography than race. You tended to kind of be pushed in the same economic class. And I lived in what is now fancy downtown Philadelphia. It was not fancy then. It was, I lived in the section that was just called South Philly. I lived at 22nd and Nordane. And it was a interesting mix. We were from Lombard Street to, I'll say, Morris Street south. From 24th Street to probably 7th or 8th Street going east. That was basically black. On the outside of that was an Irish neighborhood beyond 24th Street. On the opposite side, east, pardon me, was an Italian neighborhood. Then there was a mixture of Jewish families within all of that. The thing that brought us together was not some common thing that we were, feeling together, but it was economic. We were all in the same boat financially, and we had to go to the same district schools. We were assigned schools. So I never went to a segregated school because I lived in that neighborhood where we all went to school. So we went to school, and we interestingly went to the movie. We went to the Avon, and we segregated ourselves in the Avon.
But it wasn't segregated, it wasn't
No,
like the
we
back.
segregated ourselves. When you walked in, black folks went to the left, and then there was a middle section, and we occupied the left side of the middle section. And then the white people went to the right, and to the middle section of the right. We did that ourselves.
Well, I'm a little older than her. When I came up, the black folks was told to go to the black side, and the white people went to the white side. And in my block, there was all black people. In my school, there was all black people. I didn't get to a mixed school until junior high school. And then, even in high school, by the time I got to high school, there were 2 black kids in my class. And both of us were named Myers, not related. But on Jewish holidays, we didn't school and clothes. The 2 of us would sit there and look at each other. So, our neighborhood was not my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And okay, I'm 85, she's 80.
Right?
And my experiences are entirely different.
Because it was a different neighborhood.
No, it wasn't so much the neighborhood because there was a Jewish store in the corner, but it was entirely different. I'm glad you had that nice neighborhood.
Well, it wasn't such a nice neighborhood, nobody had money. It's just that we lived with each other, and we were required academically to go to those schools. So growing up, I never went to an all-anything school.
So here's the other thing that I found really interesting, was that these 3 women in the same city, relatively the same time, have very different experiences of it. And for whether that's economic, whether that's the color difference, or class difference, whatever, it created a whole different story. And so I think that that's something beyond the ballet aspect of it that I found really, really fascinating. And I think sometimes we don't take that into consideration about the way that our history and our stories are formed. You know, that we can be standing side by side with someone and have a completely different experience of something. Can we talk about color in class and how that works? Especially in ballet, because there are opportunities that could be afforded if you looked a certain way or you didn't look a certain way. So your mother was known for being, you know, it was, oh, she's fair. She when the school split, she was able to rent studio space in spaces that potentially, yeah, you want to tell that story?
She went to Walnut Street, close to Broad, across from the old Latin Casino. I don't know if there's anybody in here who remembers the Latin Casino on Walnut Street? And we were on the 3rd floor, across from the Latin Casino. And on the 1st floor was a grand piano sales room. And we'd walk up the steps along 2 flights of steps to get to her studio. And we had a big glass picture window to look down onto Broad Street. And I suspect you're right that she got that address because she was fair. And as we would say in our family, you don't open up your big mouth. And but we were only there for 2 years, because when they found out who our clientele was, we were gone after the lease. And that was the same way. We were in 4 places on Walnut Street. We went across the street where the Latin Casino is, but down across, what was that?
Across 12 something. Yeah.
1214.
Yeah, 1310 first.
1310 first. And we were upstairs on all of these places. 2-year lease, gone after 2 years. And then down the street further on Broad Street on the same side, on Walnut Street on the same side, we had 2 stories. We were on the 2nd floor and the 3rd floor. And we had Mrs. Riley and Adise Riley and Mrs. Baden, who made all the tutus. They even had their own sewing area because it was so big, the 2 floors. And again, after 2 years, we were gone.
She made sure to sign that 2-year lease.
Yeah, because my mother, being fair-skinned, she probably, as we would say, and I hope I don't hurt anybody's feelings, don't open up your big mouth, just go and inquire and sign the lease.
Because if you spoke about who or where you lived, or
if they knew that we were black to begin with, they would not have rented to us. And after 1, 2, 3 studios on that, my mother went to local down in West Philly, close to where we live.
Went to Chambers Street first.
That's right.
No, first we went to Chambers Street. That was downtown.
Then we were on North Broad Street, where it used to be Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
We were like 3 buildings in. And I think it was over a piano store again. Yeah. We were everywhere, but it was only for 2 years every place, because as soon as they saw who we really were, and even in my family, I'm sitting here looking very fair, I know, and but I am a black person, and my mother was complexioned like I am, but the thing that a lot of people, and this has nothing to do with ballet, I'm so sorry.
No, go, tell your story.
But the people, it's like, you know who you are inside. You know who your many, many relatives are. You happen to have fair skin, but your heart is the heart of a person of color. And
well, she would tell us as students, be like, I'm just as black as you are.
that's exactly, and
You're like, okay. That just proved it.
I know it's just a teach for me. Some of the parents would say, you know that white lady. I said, I'm sorry, she's not white.
you're not white.
She's not white, she's just fair. You know.
But sorry.
No, that's all right.
I think it's important for us to hear, because Marion Sujet using that privilege
was able to expose her students and give her students different opportunities of training because she could slip by. Ms. Brown, would you tell the story of how you integrated ballet arts at Carnegie?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
This is
that
what we're
was
here for,
actually-
people.
Actually, it's two brief ones. The first one, when I did the first time I did a solo at 14, since we were downtown, people used to come by the studio. Remember, and hire us to do performances. Renee Brith one year came to the school and asked Miss Marion to bring some performers to a luncheon that they had. Little did they know, she had her way of teaching without talking. So instead of bringing our Dunham class or a jazz and tap class, she brought me and I did the Dying Swan. And she did the original choreography because we had George Chaffee teaching us some of the original work and a live and pianist instead of a record player. So that was her way of teaching. Instead of just sending in a bunch of kids to tap and entertain them, they had to digest this brown girl doing the Dying Swan and doing the original choreography. When we went to ballet arts, that was really amazing. She went before we went, got our class cards and signed us in, and then we appeared. So they thought that it was a summer program, and young people from all over the country were coming to New York to ballet arts, which was in Carnegie Hall. And I appeared, and they thought I was going to be somebody else. So they tried to direct me in another direction.
And what had Ms. Juzet told you?
Nothing.
No, she said, don't.
No, she didn't say anything. She just gave me my class schedule and said that's what I was to do. And if you knew Miss Marion, I never was afraid of her exactly. But I did cross her. So even though I was 15, and I'm standing in front of this woman telling me to go someplace else, and I'm thinking, I don't care who you are. I'm not going back and tell Miss Marion that I have my card, it's paid for, I'm going in here. And if I'm not going in here, then you're giving me back my money.
Please tell about the partnering.
Oh, the partnering. Oh, that was harrowing. We had part of our schedule, we had point, we had technique class, and we had partnering. In that era, you didn't have very many men, period. So there were maybe 4 or 5 men in the whole class with 20, 25 girls. The first partnering class we had, the teacher called women up, and then she called the men. He called the men, rather, it was Dubidowski. Nobody would come behind us. So Miss Marion said, okay, that's all right. You know, we're ready to cry and run out of the room. She said, we will get behind each other and we'll hold on to each other. And we had about 15 men at that time, which was extraordinary in Philadelphia. We will teach them what we learned here and we'll take that back. That only lasted for 1 week. The next week we went back and the best man in the class came behind me and said, Mr. And that was the end of that.
Didn't she, when you first went to the partnering class, she partnered you?
No, we just, we did partner each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not very well because we weren't.
We're not guys.
We couldn't pick up each other, we couldn't do much.
Now, I cannot call you Aunt Joan. But
Everybody calls me Aunt. There are a few
distinguish-
other things they call me too. Aunt Joan is, or Jamie.
You're the only one that actually went to the Sidney Marion School of Dance, correct?
No, Judy
I
was
did.
there.
Oh, that's true, that's true. So can you talk about their partnership and what that was like?
Well, I got there the last year they were together.
They were only together 1 year.
Yeah, 49 is when I got there. And because Miss Cindy was teaching you the first day I went there, and I thought she was a white girl. But then they split, but my mother knew Miss Cindy. So, and then I stayed at Sydney. But it ended up that during this time, all the brown girls ended up at Sydney's, except for a few, and then other girls went to Marion's. Because it was also economic balance too. Most of the doctors, lawyers, and all their kids went to Judimar. And most of the kids that stayed at Sydney's, we were all like, just average kids. So, but when I got to Sydney's, I had some training at high school with Miss Langenfeld.
Virginia.
Can you talk about,
Yeah.
talk about the dance club? So this is one of the things that's very unique about Philadelphia, is that the arts was so plentiful here, and the artists, there were so many artists, both music and like from opera, musicians, opera singers, ballet dancers, that, tell them about the clubs. I won't talk about it, you tell them.
Well, I think I went to the club first, because I'm older. Miss Langenfelter, she had been a member of the Captain Littlefield Ballet Company. And in those days, when you stopped dancing, you became a teacher. You didn't go to college for dance, you went, so she was a physical education teacher. She was our gym teacher.
She was.
And in our gym classes, and it all went down through all of us, even after me, and she would do ballet dances in the gym class. We all did ballet, whether you did ballet or not. And she invited me to the ballet club, and she said, you should dance. I said, well, I can dance. She said, no, you should dance. Come to the ballet club. So when I got there, I was me, the only black girl, and everybody was like, what are you doing here? I hadn't the slightest idea about that. I didn't even know my mother took me to Esther Marie Dorsey when I was young, because everybody went to Miss Essie's dancing school. And I would speak to Miss Essie. My mother took me out after the first week because I lost my ballet slip, and she said, I don't have another $1.50. You can't go back. But, so that was my dance career. But Miss Lingenfelter put me in the club, and I decided if I'm going to come to the ballet club, I better go to ballet class. And I went up and down every school on Walnut, Chestnut Street trying to find a school. None of them would take black youngsters. So I had a girlfriend who, her name was Virginia Turigian. She said, if you come to school early, I'll teach you what I learned in my school yesterday. And then when they start in the ballet club, you have some idea what's going on. I know what a seesaw is because Virginia taught me. So I learned a lot from Virginia. So by the time I got to Sydney's, I knew a little bit more than the rest of the girls. So I started teaching for her, and that's how I started teaching. But then I wanted to go to Marion's, but I couldn't go because first of all, my mother couldn't afford it. And second of all, I thought only light-skinned people were over there.
No.
Because that was my opinion. That was my opinion, Then I met Dolores, and I said, oh. It's not so, because Philadelphia, back in the day, there was a colored thing. Light-skinned and brown-skinned people. We got to have, that is honest.
It might not be just back in the day.
Yeah.
But
So the brown-skinned people, we just,
Wait, okay.
it happened, it was going on.
Yeah, I just want to say, it's with the color thing, I was one of the luckiest people on the planet, how I started having formal training. I started in junior high school. A woman named Miss Weir, also a gym teacher, she can start to, was teaching the back. We had these wonderful clubs, and I was in the ballet club. I went in 8th grade, and when I say luckiest people, Miss Marion, and she brought Judy, was a little girl, to a performance, a student performance, and gave 3 of us a scholarship. And what she was looking for when the partnership split was, it appeared most of the younger girls, when the teenage girls stayed with Miss Sidney, and the younger girls came with Miss Marion, she was looking for more teenage girls, older girls. And none of us were, we were 4-finger, we were brown-skinned girls. So I didn't know about that, but I was just very lucky to be in the right place at the right time, and she came to that particular performance, and from that point on, for me, it was magic.
And Judy, were you in the dance clubs as well at
Yes,
school?
I went to West Philly too.
So you guys were in the same
West
dance?
Philly,
we all
we used to call it.
Let's go there.
Yeah, we all, yeah.
Yes,
we all
and
did
I
the same
danced
thing,
under
yeah.
Virginia Lingenfelder.
Yeah.
And when I was a senior, I finally got a leading part. I was the dying girl in Death and Transfiguration.
Oh, God, yes.
And I got to
Yeah.
walk. Somebody else went to West Philly and remembers that? Okay. And the last part of the ballet, they have these steps. They have great scenery. And the dying girl goes up the steps and then collapses. I loved it. But my mother was a mother. She cooked spaghetti, loved it, spaghetti sauce rather, spaghetti sauce. We had all kinds of favorite meals. She was a mother at home as well as a ballet teacher. And in her studio, she always had a pot. Joan has a pot.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, I taught for 2 years some youngsters for Joan. And every time I would get there, Joan had a pot of food cooking in her kitchen, and my mother did the same thing. She'd always have a pot of food. It's for any teachers or anybody else, but mostly it was other teachers went in there, and then family who went down to the studio so we could see our mother, you know. And when my father worked the books, my father taught school and worked in the post office too, and he would come to the studio and do the books and wait for us, and he'd be cleaning up as my mother was polishing the mirrors before we all left, and we'd get back home on Friday night. It was the biggest night because we had adult dancers that took class, and we'd get home around 11 o'clock at night. And it was a family business. And my mother's parents lived with us, and they really raised us so that my mother could have the dancing school.
Can you talk about the sense of community? Because in all of their stories, there is this incredible through line of your strong family unit, and then also the extended family that's either in the actual community or specifically in the dance community. And how do you see that time, and how do I phrase this? How do you see what was happening then either not reflected, or what do we need now in terms of community?
I don't know what you need as far as community now, because I ended up, after quite a few years in the so-called dance world, I ended up as an English teacher in New Jersey, and with, a family also. And I feel that all the people that came through my mother's studio were family. I got help from homework from all kinds, male dancers, female dancers. If there was anybody who had no place to go Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, that were students, especially adult students, or other teachers, adults, they would be at our house.
You talk about how Judith Jamison's mother helped you. Can you talk about the Mother's Club and that sort of thing inside the dance school?
Well, Judimar School had a mother's club that would help with a lot of different things that people didn't particularly know about. And I auditioned at 17 for School of American Ballet classes. And I was told by the
Wait, what year was that, please?
That was 1953.
Did you hear her? She auditioned in
1953.
1953 for the School of American Ballet and got in. I just want you to hear that. Picture 1953, School of American Ballet, and what it looks like today. And this was 1950. Okay, go ahead.
I was told that by the Mother's Club, if I got in, they would give me the car fare, and they would give me some spending money for the first 6 months that I was there. So at the recital that year,
I know.
they gave me a wonderful card, which I still have, with a ballerina on it, and wishing me well. And that was Judith Jamison's mother, was the president of the Mother's Club at that time. So one of my responsibilities in the school was to teach the younger students. Judy was DJ was in that class, Judy Jemison, Donna Lowe. It was about, what, 10 girls? Probably about 10 girls. And that was my responsibility. So I felt very a part of them, of those little, because that was my first experience to be responsible for teaching and knowing that they were a generation under me, that to be responsible for what I was doing and to be serious, and for the Mothers Club then to give me that start. Well, I did go, I did get in, and I was told, it was really hair-raising, because I was told by the administration there that if I didn't go into C, which was advanced, I wouldn't come into the school because I was too old.
She was 17.
That was 17, but I did get it. So that was
So
not a
part of
problem.
what I'm trying to do is like myth bust. There's a myth about, you know, black bodies can't do ballet, right? There's a myth about economic, like there's always this thing about, well, black people are too poor. Like our stories always turn into an old Negro spiritual. And part of that's true, but it's not the whole story. And so, like, I hate to get hashtaggy, but hashtag Black excellence, Black joy, you know, Black girl magic, all that. But it is true, and I think that our holistic story isn't often presented. Because I see the beauty and the artistry and the elegance and the intelligence, the integrity of all of you women and your mother and the generation before. And yet we don't know about that. And oftentimes when we talk about it, we only talk about what you couldn't do or what didn't happen, instead of looking at actually what did and how amazing that it did happen. Does that make sense? Can we just, is there any questions or comments?
My question is, why encourage your parents to keep following every time? Because I'm assuming around that time it was kind of dangerous, probably, having black kids coming to a neighborhood that's not for black kids. So it probably was dangerous. So what pushed your parents to say, you know what, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep following every time she moves.
It wasn't dangerous. It was Broad, it was Walnut Street between Broad and,
Well, it was from
15.
13 to
it wasn't a
I
dangerous
think she's talking
neighborhood.
about, like, you're assuming that racially because
No, nobody was attacking.
right. So that's what I think is so amazing about this specific Philadelphia experience, is that in our minds, we're like, ooh, segregation. We see, you know, crosses burning, cake. Like, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't exactly the way we have been taught that living in that time of segregation, it was...
No, nobody ever attacked.
No.
I would leave the studio even as a 14, 15-year-old girl at night to walk home because she had an apartment. And I'd walk all the way down, downtown, and nobody ever assaulted me. I never heard of anybody attack. Nobody even verbally said anything to us.
No.
They noticed that we were coming and didn't want us there, but nobody actually frontally attacked us or did anything to us. We went to buy ballet clothes at Bones, that was right there.
Right.
Nobody, we just.
Where couldn't you go? I mean, where couldn't you go?
Well, the only problem that we had was in our regular life was there were a few shops that weren't welcoming. That's all. When we went out to buy a sandwich, we said you can't buy a sandwich here.
That's what's amazing. Oh, please, here, July, here.
Oh, my parents used to tell me they lived in South Philly. They didn't have that type of problem in South Philadelphia. But there was areas of Philadelphia did have problems, and we call it sundown. That was in the Kensington area. After the sun goes down, black folks could not be in it. Even though they were a section of Kensington, it was predominantly black neighborhoods. You had black neighborhoods in Germantown. You had those black communities, and whites lived surrounding, and you didn't have those type of problems at all as far as racial fighting or anything of the such. but you still kept yourself separated.
We did.
You
But
did.
you know,
keep
you have to
yourself
also
separated.
think of the time. period.
Yes.
Because as time went along, things changed.
Yes.
You know, I lived in a time, me as a teenager, where it was totally, I know, we could not walk to school unless it was more than 3 of us and move and walk through a white neighborhood. With that, the certain streets you didn't go across alone. But we're talking about Center City, where they were located, where there was always a constant flow of traffic and mixture of people, so they probably didn't have that problem of going in and out of the building.
Yeah, never did. And I-
But Philadelphia is still very segregated. I mean, it's very segregated.
I think it's more so.
But okay, so
It's even more
it changes, like
Yeah.
the city morphs, and so the lines get drawn different ways, and economics and whatever's happening in the country probably play a huge part in, I mean, look at today.
Going back.
You see,
But you know,
so,
we were talking about family, I think we want to get back to that, because this happens in dancing schools, that we create a family,
Yes.
and that, you know, I got a loaf of bread on the table, a pot on, because if you're hungry, eat, but you still gotta dance. And we're gonna make sure you get to class, and we're gonna make sure you have the best teachers, even my kids. You know, now, today, I still do the same thing, which I learned from your mom. You know, it's a family, and that we wanna produce excellence in that family, and we make sure that happens in the family. And even though there was a period where people were territorial with their dancers, if you went to Sydney's, you didn't go to Marion's, you know. And then we had some, Marion, I had to always try to dance better than Dolores Brown, you know, because she was over at Judemar. But we were still friends, you know, but we had that honest, what do you call, rivalry. But we were still striving to be good at what we were doing. And our teachers were trying to make sure we were. Sydney was a nurturer, she kept you close. Marion was a go-getter and spreader out. And I wanted to be with Marion, but my mom said, you got to stay with Miss Sydney. You know, so it was difficult. I never went to New York till I went to Durham.
But Miss Marion taught me so many things without sitting down and lecturing. The example that I talked about earlier of going to a Brene Brown luncheon, and instead of doing what they probably expected would be, she said, I'm going to teach you all, including teaching me something. This is also who we are. We're also ballet people. We don't just do other kinds of dance, but we're classical ballet dancers. And she really, I was so fortunate to have her as my first teacher, because it was your whole self. It was how you presented yourself. Your education was important to her. How you carried yourself in the world. She would be on you like, you can't believe if your clothes weren't clean. Everything had to be the best you could be. And I never got a feeling when I was studying with anybody. I never felt a competition of anyone. I always felt a competition with me. I always wanted to be better than me the next time. If I always had a goal. If I was doing double pirouettes, I wanted to do triple. If I was doing 20 fortes, I wanted to do 32. And that's the kind of energy. Class was almost like a sports event in a way. I mean, we would start turning and just keep upping our game with jumping. We just work higher and higher. But I felt it was the whole person that I got from Miss Marion. It was everything you were supposed to be. When you present yourself to the theater, and I took that with me as a professional, when you come out of the backstage door, look like what the person standing there trying to get your autograph imagines. Don't come out looking like you fell off some truck or something. You know, try to carry that through, because that's who you were. So let that be your whole self.
So at this point, can we bring up the house lights a little bit? We have some black ballet dancers here. They're like, ooh, stars. So I'm sorry, Robert. Yes. Sure, before I get
to that point. So,
Good. Julia?
I love what you're talking about what you got as, not just as the technique of dance, but also what you got that stayed with you for the rest of your life. Like, you know, when you go through the stage door, be the person that they want, you know. And I feel like we're losing that. And I feel like it all draws. Almost, like, so I'm just curious, what value do you see that we might be losing? Or what value do you see about letting it go? You know, that formality of all of it, on stage and off
You
stage.
mean me personally? I felt that every lesson that I learned, from having clean tights to having my ballet, to this day, I worked for Joan for 41 years. And I never, ever presented myself as a teacher with my street clothes on, or with baggy pants, or with no ballet slippers. So I thought it was important to present myself. I wanted them to give me too. I wanted us both. If I could come on time and I could present myself a certain way, then I expected the same thing back.
Yes.
Yeah, so I wouldn't ask you to be something that I wasn't willing to be. I could certainly come with my proper clothes. I could certainly present myself a certain way. I could use the language of ballet properly. It's important to pass that on, and I was very lucky to have my first teacher be Marion Sujak, because I can't imagine where my life would have gone. I mean, first time I went with the Negro Ballet to Great Britain, I got invited to a wonderful dinner party at a mansion. And the thing that was so wonderful was I could walk in and feel very comfortable in my skin, that I was invited there. And I didn't feel awkward at all. I felt very good about it. And I didn't have to be shy around the people. I was prepared because I was wearing what I should wear to the party. I felt comfortable in myself, and that I got at ballet school, not just at home.
Wait, can you talk a little bit about the tea dances? Jude Jameson talked about that your mother would do sometimes tea dances to teach social skills. Do you remember that?
No.
She was younger too.
Well, Judith Jameson said that she would do a tea. Okay, I'll do it this way.
All right,
You
no,
said
that was
that-
the Mother's Club.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was the Mother's
Yeah, that
Club.
was Mother's Club.
The Mother's Club would do tea dancing.
Yeah.
They would do
But
To
it
help
had
the
to
kids
do
learn
with your
social
whole-
grace.
Yeah, with your whole
Yes.
self.
Yes, your whole self.
Yeah, how
The
you sat
students,
down.
the University of the Arts
Yeah.
students, your whole self.
Well, I think too, that you could go to art class, you could go to dancing class, you could take piano lessons, and after the lesson, that's the last thing you have to do with that teacher until you go back again. But Miss Sidney, my mother, people like George Chaffee, it was your whole life, your whole life, and it wasn't just at the ballet reel. It was a community. It was like we were all family. The people that came to my mother's studio, we were all one family, and we learned so many things besides tendu and plie and so forth. We learned to treat, and it wasn't a lesson given us, it was just the way that the school was run.
And the beingness of.
Yes,
of
we
others.
respected each other, and we supported each other, and it passed on into our regular lives, our so-called regular lives. But our regular life was really in dance.
I got it. I mean, I am a product of all of you. I was 3 years old when I went to study at Aunt Jones. I was 8 when I had your mother. And I've always wondered why I was this way. And now, in listening to your stories and getting to really dig deep, now I kind of understand what Brenda Dixon Godchild was talking about, the audaciousness.
But I want to interject on it because for years it was easy to do that. It was easy to say, you got to dress right, you got to comb your hair, you got to come clean. Mamas are different. I had mamas backing you up when you try to teach your children what to do. Mamas don't even come into school no more, they drop off. And the kids, I have to take them in the dressing room and comb their hair. Or if I try to correct them, I'm told that's not my job. But even with the company members, I'm like, why you got that on? You're on the job. There's a whole different shift in what is happening with our world.
In the world.
And it's making it hard for dance teachers to say, manners matter, dressing matters, comb your hair. I don't want that mohawk on my stage. So, it's entirely different. The times have changed. Tommy, you can tell it. Tommy can tell it. And when I say they call me a few other names, it's because of your demand to try to make, and it's not so much a demand, it's an ask and an embrace.
For the greater good as well.
Yes.
So I want to, Robert, would you mind saying a few words? I have a few of my Dance Theater of Harlem folk here, including Giselle, but also Robert Garland, who's the resident choreographer. But he's also a Philadelphian and also an alum of Philadelphia. So I know you have some things to say. Can we get the gentleman here in the leather sports coat? I'm like,
Thank you, Teresa.
is that your mother?
That's Mom. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, it's wonderful listening because, of course, I did dance for Philadelphia. One of the wonderful things about, I think, my time here with Philadelphia and what I learned about being an artistic director or a person that's delivering artistic direction was that there were times that Joan Myers Brown made choices that were not necessarily to benefit the audience that she was developing, but to develop us as artists. So I had the opportunity to work with William Dollar, who was an original member of New York City Ballet, in Joan Myers Brown's studio, dancing to Stravinsky. I also danced with Roy Tobias there. He taught classes, another original. In fact, Roy Tobias taught Arthur Mitchell all of his roles before he left New York City Ballet. So those people I had, in addition to the African-American choreographers, Billy Wilson, of course, Tally Beatty, so that my experience by the time I got to New York was I was much more finished in terms of what I had than a lot of other people that were around me at that time. And of course, my ballet teacher there, Dolores Brown, and she put me behind a woman that I found out was my cousin later on, Debbie Manning, who at the time I did not know was my cousin. So it's wonderful being here and hearing all this. The webmaster for Dancer of Harlem now, her name is Leslie, and her last name is Sujet. Yes, and she is related to Miss Marion as well. So it is all come full circle. So, yeah.
That's incredible. Oh, Giselle, can you, did you have something to say? No,
I had another thought earlier on, but speaking to the family, having taught at Philadelphia School and the company, and having been trained at Dance Theater of Harlem, the African American dance schools, no matter what they're doing, no matter what type of an organization it is, there is always this familial training of the entire person. The dress codes, the how you have to speak. Arthur Mitchell said, if you don't get an A, you could forget it, okay? You lose your scholarships if you don't have your academic grades together. So it permeates our culture, and that when we have our dance schools, and that nurtures the person, as Ms. Brown was talking about. But what I also wanted to bring up is Ms. Brown said that she, and Teresa pointed out to us, that she was in SAB in the 50s. But what we found as we were doing the research that was interesting is when she was in SAB, most of the teachers were of Russian descent because they were all friends of Balanchine. There were a couple of other Europeans. There were no Americans. So her experience from a teacher-student point of view was very different from, let's say, who I spoke to about this, Hinton Battle, who came years later, where at this point there are all American teachers at SAB, and what kind of treatment they were getting and what was happening. So there's that whole thing too. Who's doing the teaching? In my research of 20 years now, it's always very interesting that those older, well-known European teachers were most often more receptive and nurturing to the black dancers than were the American-born ones.
That's exactly what happened to us with Anthony Tudor.
Yes.
When he came to Philadelphia and taught up in Frankfurt, when I went up there, because my girlfriend said you should come to my aunt's studio, he didn't have a problem with me walking in as a black girl into that classroom. And he was talking about partnering, when none of the guys were partnering me. Mr. Tudor was my partner. I learned to speak in beauty pie to do it. But he put us there because he was European. He didn't have that same American thing going.
Can I just mention something about Tudor? I discovered in more recent history that that was always part of Tudor's sensibility. I went to, probably 10 years now, to the Royal Ballet in London. And they did a ballet, and I was just thunderstruck. The lead in the ballet was supposed to have a little, I look back in the books, not the program, in the program. And I forgot the dancer now, it's going out of my, he had a little black afro. Well, I saw Carlos Acosta do it. So it was a ballet from the 40s that he had choreographed with that in mind already. So that was way before he met any of us. I had the honor of working in the Ballet Guild as a full member. And he, like Joan said, he didn't have a problem.
Explain the big ballet.
The Philadelphia Ballet Guild was a precursor to what is the Pennsylvania Ballet now. And there were four of us. It was John Jones, Billy Wilson, me, and Betsy Dickerson. And I never felt I didn't belong there. I didn't feel odd. Tudor was very strange to get along
Well, it was
with.
the Ballet Guild that brought Tudor to Philadelphia. The Ballet Guild.
That I didn't know. I
That
didn't know.
was the Ballet Guild.
Yeah.
That was the school
Oh.
that brought him to
But that was,
Philadelphia.
I didn't go to
The
Frankfurt.
Guild
I didn't go to Frankfurt.
went after the initial.
I went after that. I never
Yeah.
went to Frankfurt.
That's when John
Yeah.
Jones and Billy and all went after I left. That's
Yeah.
when it was still the Ballet Guild.
I didn't know about
What's,
that.
what's interesting is, a few months ago, my friend Andrea Long, who's also a Philadelphian, right, trained at Pennsylvania Ballet, then went on to dance for New York City Ballet and then danced at Harlem.
But she was at
We're all good things start. She was like, oh my God, Teresa, have you seen this? And it was a review of the Washington Ballet of Ashley Murphy in Lilac Garden. And it's a Tudor ballet. And it's really, I mean, if you, has anybody seen it? No, it's really unrequited love.
Yeah.
It takes place in a garden. You know, somebody's having an affair with this one and that one and love, but you know, she doesn't want to marry him, she just loves somebody else. It's a love story.
Turn of the century.
Yeah.
Turn of the century. So this critic wrote, because Ashley Murphy, who was a very chocolate, lovely ballerina, was in the lead, and her male partner was a white male, he remarked that it made it an interracial couple, and it was to distraction for him. And he said it was not what Anthony Tudor was trying to project when he choreographed his ballet of English society.
But see,
Yeah, but the interracial problem was in this man's head.
Yeah.
the problem is that when you write a critique like that, you should research your history of who the person is. He obviously did not know anything really about Anthony Tudor. I didn't even realize how Tudor's bent toward being open to anybody until I went and saw that particular.
I got him straight, Ms. Brown.
Okay.
I got it straight. Because I thought about it and I was like, wow, that's very interesting. I write for Dance Magazine and I wrote about cultural bias in dance critique. And I said, well, you don't have a problem when there are white people doing Chinese and Nutcracker. See? I don't think, right? Arabian, you don't have a problem with that, but somehow it's too distraction. You know, and I said, well, is it the
Yeah,
fact?
but you also don't have a problem having a very big fat woman in
Yeah.
that butterfly being, you know, small,
Not a
petite
problem.
Asian person.
So I just thought it was very interesting. I wanted to take the moment to just point that out because societally we have that thing. And he felt it was comfortable. He felt comfortable enough. And somebody also felt like his editor didn't say, that it was okay. And in the theater, it's supposed to be willing suspension of disbelief, right? This is, you know, he was like, it's the period. Well, the Lilac Garden takes place in a lilac garden. They bloom. The only thing that really tells you about the period are the costumes. And not every production has the costumes of the era. So really, you're just talking about a love story. But for him, it was something else. And I felt like his comment said, well, then you would have a problem with any other brown girl, male or female, in a role opposite another.
Their personality.
Right. Giselle.
Further with Tudor, that's interesting because he did a ballet called Undertow, and it's a very difficult, it's a very deep ballet, and he gave the lead in his second setting of it on the American Ballet Theater to then quarter ballet African-American dancer Annabella Sims.
Yeah.
Nobody said anything because the person that she was dancing was a person of ill repute. So we don't have an issue there. The different critiques were not there because this was a very strong personality. So I guess she was fitting the bill of what a black woman should be. I find that really
But
interesting.
Joselle, unfortunately, she is a beautiful dancer. I got to know her. We don't have the privilege of having had her talent stay in America because she was not given that opportunity.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm
And she
saying
went right out of ballet theater.
Tudor, no, but to speak to what she's saying about Tudor, I think Tudor was always,
Exactly.
they're
Yes.
placing things on Tudor that isn't true. Because
Exactly.
what he said to her, and I have quoted in my research, is this is the kind of role that when you do it, you become a ballerina. And she could never do it. Like you said, she had to go to Europe. So I think he was putting things on Tudor, number one. And number two, it was interesting when Tudor did give roles to black women, depending on the role, it depended what they said.
Well, Mr. Tudor told me, he said, if you are serious about ballet and you're going to have to leave Philadelphia. He said, you're going to have to go somewhere else. He said, I don't know where that somewhere else is, but you're going to have to leave Philadelphia. My mom wouldn't have me.
Anybody, other comments? Oh, here?
Yeah,
Julie.
no, just because you were talking about roles, I know you mentioned the dying woman that falls on the stairs, but I would just love to know, for all three of you, what was your favorite thing that you've ever portrayed on stage, and maybe why?
Well, I never got to be a ballerina on stage. But my favorite role was with Billy Wilson in a cotillion here in Philadelphia.
Let's get into it. We'll talk about the cotillions, but do you want to say your favorite role?
I had a lot. I had a lot. One of my favorite roles, which
people didn't get to see too many. Alvin Ailey did a Odysseys, 3 women and 3 men. It was lovely, South American composer. And we auditioned it for Valentin. The other thing I think, speaking of Tally Beattie, I got to do, he did a ballet legend about a horse culture, women, where women were dominant. I like that role. That was pretty good. But one of my other favorite Bluebird Pilot did. You know, that was, I did, John Jones. Yeah, that was Bernard. Bluebird Pilot did was one of it, because I got to do it with the whole live music, tiara, Royal Theater, you know, the whole 9 yards. So I guess that opening, I think, was probably a favorite. But I have a bunch.
Well, I wasn't the dancer that these
Well, I mean,
women were.
We're going to talk about the cotillion. Oh, wait,
Well, that's
wait.
what I'm getting ready to.
Okay.
Well,
No,
my
go ahead.
favorite also was with Billy Wilson.
Yeah, Billy Wilson.
Very, very handsome. And a wonderful dancer. And a gorgeous body. And I got to play a role of Margaretta, or whatever it was. And he was Pietro. This was for the Cotillion Ballet.
So fill us in on what exactly the cotillions were, because this is fascinating too.
Well, Eugene Wayman Jones, who was a music professor at Temple, he had this grand idea of having a Christmas cotillion. And of course, it was predominantly for us people. And it was wonderful, and it was, you look forward to Christmas time, you look forward to the rehearsals. They had a huge number of high school students that did the cotillion waltz every year. Our men were in tuxedos. Our women were in ball gowns. And on the tremendous floor of what's the convention hall. You don't know where that, but most of you don't probably remember that. It's been knocked down. And here we are. And the dancers were all high school students. Doing a cotillion waltz. Our people in gowns and in tux, and they looked so gorgeous on the floor. And we had Eugene Wayman Jones, a fair-skinned, black man, who was a professor at Penn, a music professor, and he was able to get members of the Philadelphia Orchestra, but not Mr. Ormandy, to play for the entire evening. We had a whole ballet story that Dr. Jones had concocted in his head. We were in the most gorgeous costumes. The floor was tremendous. It was not a stage. It was, you know what...
Felt like the escapade.
Yeah, the people are up in the balconies looking down on us. Gorgeous wooden floor, and his stories were always fairy tales. The one, of course, that I just admitted to, I was Margarita, and Billy was Pietro, and of course there were love dances between us, and my family, meaning the dancers, you know, that presented me to him and his family. It was lovely, a little story. But at the very end, of course we were all stage at this point, we came on in a carriage with this white horse pulling us down the whole length of Convention Hall, Billy and I. Waving to people. Wait a minute. We got down to right to the audience that was on the ground level, and the horse turned. There was a person that was walking the horse, a trainer. And the horse turned, and as he turned, you know what he did? But every Christmas, for quite a few years, I would say about 6 years.
The most remarkable thing I remember was seeing Dolores Brown parade from one end of that convention hall to the other.
It's
long. I mean, that was like a football field.
back leg, back leg, back leg, back leg.
Well, I remember when we did the Blue Venus.
Yes.
And you rose from the basement of Convention Hall on a, it was the orchestra pit that went down.
The hydraulic, yeah.
Yes. And Dolores was on it with a backdrop that looked like the ocean. And she rose up from this, and it was like, you know, they didn't give me that part. I did the choreography too. And it was fantastic. And then I mean, not just her ballet training, but she, like, I am somebody. And we all felt like that. We all felt like that at dancing school. I think that's one of the things that, no matter whether it was Miss Sydney's school, my mother's school, Olive Bowser, remember Olive Bowser's school, or any other school that took in mostly black young men and young women. This was something at that time in history that we were the most important. And we were made to feel like no one could sing better, no one could dance better, no one could play the violin better. We were our own people, our own people. And of course, times have changed and other folks have assimilated into us and we've assimilated into them. But in those times when there was still segregation, this was a glorious time.
And they would give awards, he gave an award to Pearl Buck.
Pearl Buck.
And Marion Bethune. And yeah, he would give these awards that would just, make it a spectacular evening.
Right.
And that's when I used to choreograph half the Blue Venus for Sydney. Yeah.
So the two schools, the Judamar School and the Sydney School, would combine. Would do like their sections, and they would combine. And they would do a full-length story ballet.
And they
full-on props, costumes, hydraulics. I mean,
it was a spectacular.
It was a spectacular event, and I know that everybody else who danced in it, whatever big part or small part, we were something special. We were really something special because it was in a time when a lot of black children, we didn't get certain opportunities. I was in the 2nd grade at the Emlyn School in Germantown. Right. And we were doing Hansel and Gretel. The school was doing Hansel and Gretel. And I remember, brother, come and dance with me. Both my hands I offer thee. Right foot first, left foot second, round about and back again. And I loved it. And my mother had a dancing school where we did Jeté Tamave Panderea but I just, this was my school and my classmates and my teachers, and I did my little part. And I knew I never messed up because I had some experience on the stage. And all of a sudden, I couldn't do it because the mother of the little boy didn't want me, with my yellow skin even, to dance with her son. And I didn't get a chance to do it. And I'll never forget that feeling because I knew my little part. And I treated my partner well. I didn't try to upstage him or anything because I had learned from my mom. And the only reason, and my classroom teacher took me aside and told me, and so I couldn't dance the little part with a bunch of other kids on the stage. We all had partners because I was black and he wasn't allowed to dance with me.
And Teresa, I have to, because this is 1949, 48, when I was in junior high school. And there's so many contradictions. Lady talked about us being safe. Remember the photographs I showed you from the newspaper of me in Sympathy and Beauty from junior high school? That was junior high school, Barrett Junior High School. And guess who my partner was? Because boys didn't study there. A tall white girl was my partner. So our stories are so interesting about what race meant then, because I'm having all these different kind of adventures. I mean, I didn't even remember I did that. I hate to say maybe the brain just went south. But while I was digging through stuff and trying to remember dates and things, I came across that I gave it to you, didn't I? Yeah, the newspaper articles. I made the newspaper that year. And this talk about how your brain goes south. I thought I was in the chorus. Turned out I was the Sleeping Beauty. And I didn't remember it until I saw the articles. And there is my partner, this tall white girl, because boys didn't dance. Boys wouldn't dare. I mean, Billy Wilson tells wonderful stories about walking hippie hop out of his house with his gym bag to ballet school, so they wouldn't know that he was going to dancing. You know.
Well, you know, Billy, I had to make Billy take ballet because all he wanted to take was tap. Because he said he wasn't putting on no tights. So I let him put on tights with his swim trunks, so that he would do that. And I promised him if he danced with Jackie Hartman, who he loved, that he could do it if it was a ballet dance. And, you know, I had that same story again with St. Booker, always not wanting to be ballet dancers. And Billy Wilson ended up with the Royal Ballet in Holland. St. Booker ended up in the Monaco Ballet, the Monaco Carlo. But, you know, Dolores' stories are just so different from mine. And I don't know if it's a matter of 5 years or neighborhood. Because I was black, and I was treated black.
But I think that's,
but I was just treated like I was fortunate enough, whatever the time was, whatever the circumstances were, they developed differently. I don't know why.
And this is why I think it's so important just to share. Because I know that, how many of you in here even knew about the history of the cotillions here in Black society? No, people don't know.
the cotillion.
About the
Oh, you
cotillions.
know,
I've heard it.
but like, it doesn't even, for me, it doesn't even really matter.
But there are cotillions still going on.
Yes.
We're talking about the cotillion in 1949.
At Christmas time.
At Christmas, 48, 49, when it was at the convention center. That's a different cotillion.
Let's go here.
Pardon me? Was I born in? I was born in Southwest off of Graceberry Avenue, 47th and Wood Pascal Avenue. And, you know, around my neighborhood, right where I live, they ran stores, but I was in a black neighborhood and everything we did, I can tell you, I didn't know anything about mixed until I went to junior high school, and I got my ass kicked regularly.
Here we go.
I'm here with my daughter and my daughter's friend. They've been dancing since they were 3, so the last 9 years. So I've been supporting my daughter on her journey, and it's been interesting how it's taken my life's path. I've recently been appointed to the board of the Pennsylvania Ballet, and I would have never thought that would have happened in a million years. And unfortunately, I'm one of 2 people of color on the board. But what's my role in that is I'm taking from a community economic development, community bent, where I want to make sure that ballet gets into the community to allow our brown and black children to dance and to give them opportunities, because since I've been followed with my daughter on her journey, I hear the stories about how it's hard to be a person of color in the dance field professionally. And so I share that because I'm curious to know what other routes can one do to open up the doors for dancers of color. I know what my charge is. I'm going to use the Pennsylvania Ballet as a platform. We're getting ready to build a school and to make sure we get into our communities, to make sure that we bring in children of color to open up, not just for the dance, but for all the life skills they learn from being in ballet.
You know, I have to interject this, and you know, I hate to feel like I'm always negative, but I'm real. The Pennsylvania Ballet got a big grant to go into the community. All the teachers that go into the community are from Philadelphia. They don't send their ballerinas into the community. They got to send those little girls to show that you can be this, not just because somebody can teach you ballet in the school. You gotta make sure they send those white girls into our schools too.
Duly
You
noted.
just can't send Karen Pendergrass and Bonnie Bean out to the black schools.
So if I can interject, as a board member,
Very new board member at that.
you're in a wonderful position.
Yeah.
And what I would encourage is if they're planning to build a school in the community, for the community.
On North Broad Street, on
I'm
North
about,
Broad Street.
you know, it's for our, then make sure that it's equitable. And that's what she's saying. Make sure that that faculty not only reflects the community that they're teaching, but also the training is equitable. And that experience is equitable. That the same rules apply. You don't come in here with shorts in your hair like this, that, and the other.
Right.
If you were going to the real the original campus, you have the same exact experience, because a lot of what's happening with outreach is separate and not equal.
That's right.
And
that's what I'm saying. Why not send your teachers?
And access is, and exposure and access
Are two different
are
things.
two different
Absolutely.
things. So that's something that you can really, if you can get in there, and they want to do that, as the voice of color, that's something that I would encourage you really to be like, full stop, that's what it has to be.
I'm just on the other side of all of this, as you well know. I made a kind of a faith to myself that I would not cross the doors of New York City Ballet or American Ballet Theater in my life again until the stage reflected society. And I tell you why. When I first started in ballet, I was not the first. The first persons that I knew about from a wonderful mentor that I had, Joe Nash, was back in the 30s. Women of color and men of color were in ballet, seriously. They were as good as the people of that era. They were built like the people of that era. You know, we get judged a lot of times by what the current day New York City Ballet looked. New York City Ballet did not look like that. That's not what his inspirations were. I have tons of books on what the original inspiration or his masterpieces were. You grow out of that. Everything, sports, people are taller, faster, you know, it grows out of that. I don't have the courage to do what I would like to do, and I'll tell you that. I've not shared that with anybody. I'd like to make a big poster and put all the names of the board members of these companies and march up and down and say, prove who you are. I want their name. I don't want the dancers. I don't want the director. I want the board members. Because if you can put your name on something that you're saying, I intentionally leave these number of people out, then good on you. Because that's what I want to see. Not the under people, because I've been told, and I don't even know if it's true, the reason the companies are not fully integrated or reflective of society is because the board doesn't want it. Then put the board's name up there. Let them have a name. Don't they have this anonymous, the board? You know, I want those people's names out there, because I will never again go to any of those companies. Because it breaks my heart every time I see a new notice that somebody has been elevated in New York City Ballet, one person. What do we do every 25 years? We elevate a man, no women. So that's my thing. I want the board people to put their money where their mouth is.
Up here.
Hi, my name is Eric with the Q. I want to first say that Joe Myers Brown, who was right, you may have not remember me, but I went to IVD with him in Colorado, and you both have granted me scholarships for me to attend University of the Arts, and I'm forever grateful for you guys. I want to first start by saying that recently I have went through a devastating loss of my mother, and I sort of have lost like my passion for dance, and it's just sort of trying to get that back together. So I just wanted to say, ask what have you learned and realized about yourself and in your artistry while being in this particular field, and what's kept you in the field?
Good question.
Well, let's talk about that. Dolores established a scholarship fund with the International Association of Blacks in Dance, which I started celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. And she said, this takes money and gives some scholarships to some guys in memory of John Jones, and he was one of the guys, so thank you. And so, and one of the boys said, I took your money. And help. Ivory just got a job in Chicago, so, you know, the guys, you know, the guys get a lot of breaks, girls don't get, so this, but, you know, it's still not equitable or equal. But last year we started in Denver, Colorado, 2 years ago now, auditions for girls of color, because I had a teacher tell me, I said, how come, well, let me go back a minute, because I don't want to make it too long. But the Regional Dance America, which is a ballet association, was giving me an award. So I got to the award, received the award, and there's 600 little white girls. And I'm like, well, where are the black girls? This is a ballet association. So I spoke to the girl who started. I said, how come there are no black girls? She said, oh, we don't know where to find them. I'm like, well, shit, I'll find them for you. So we put out a call for black girls who did ballet to come to Denver. And we're going to audition for the major ballet companies. We had Dayton Ballet, Denver, San Francisco Ballet Theater. Dolores Brown taught the class, and the girls turned up and turned out. It was 101 black girls. We had 2 girls come from Haiti that were taking ballet class in the same year. Joffrey Ballet that year gave 20 scholarships. And this year, in my knowledge, it might have happened and I don't know about it, Pennsylvania Ballet for the first time has 2 black girls in it at the same time.
Yes.
They always have a guy.
Pennsylvania Ballet alum, front row, just saying.
But you know, let me say this very, very quickly. When we talk about the isms, and it's not a criticism of a person who has worked in a company. When you're hired, like, I don't like to criticize people for having a job. So I don't criticize the dancers. They don't make, you know, they don't make policy. So what has happened to us that we don't always recognize, people don't understand the difference between integration and tokenism. So you put a person at the top of the pole and give them wonderful things to do and elevate them, that's fine. That person's not guilty of anything but being an excellent artist. And I am 500% behind it, except I won't spend a dime to see them. But I'm 500% behind what they do, because as a dancer, I know myself, I just went and did my job. I wasn't in the politics of it. I just showed up to try to do the best that I could do. So we can support that, but I will not support going back and signing autographs and being hugely in a house. That doesn't reflect us. That gives us one person. You know, what do we understand, all of us, whatever color you are or background or whoever you are, do you understand the difference between power and what that kind of power is? That when you say, I am going to give you what you will be satisfied with, so they give you that dancer. A young man has just been elevated in New York City Ballet to principal. I just read it online. So that was Arthur Mitchell. Then what was it, Edwards? Albert, yes. And now this young man.
3. And Mel was the soloist. Mel Thomason was the
So,
soloist.
yeah. But you know what I like your quote, Dolores Brown, you say, I won't be satisfied till the ballet companies look like America.
That's right.
I mean, that's great to all of them.
Yeah, that, and none of us should be happy, because do you realize the people that we have never gotten to see? The Asian dancers. I went to see, I was invited as an alum to New York City Ballet School. And I watched a class, and there were 3 little Japanese girls, exquisite, absolutely beautiful. They were about 14 years old.
and leap forward, 15 years, they should be in the company. No, I don't see any Japanese girls in the corps de ballet. They got a Japanese principal in the Royal Ballet. What does that say? And just like you said about illusion, she's Japanese, she's doing Swan Lake. Well, so what? She's absolutely fantastic and absolutely beautiful. When I say people, Joan and I were talking about girls of color. Remember how many white girls showed up to the audition? What? And a friend of mine said, what are the white girls doing? I said, well, they're of color. And they don't have the problem that you're having because these are friends of theirs and they all came to the audition and they auditioned like everybody else. We should not do that. We should really, if the playing field needs to be, if I can cut it, I should have the job. And trust me, when the Negro Ballet went to Britain and we performed in all the Royal Opera houses, not one person ran out screaming when they saw us on the stage. So and that was British, and that was a long time ago.
In all fairness, let's say, if there's a ballet audition, there's gonna be 500 of white girls.
Sure.
And there's gonna be 2 or 3 black girls. But they're trying just as hard, everybody's trying hard, but you want to pick out who's the best and who's the most qualified, not looking at color, and that has to happen, and it still does not happen.
No.
Still does not happen.
So IABD, International Association of Blacks in Dance, they're having their annual conference. Okay, go on the website.
Los Angeles.
And this year, they're doing a ballet audition for females and for males. So spread that word out there, and it's a wonderful experience. And we do have some of the top tier company, like multi-tier, from Pacific Northwest Ballet to San Francisco Ballet to like a Ballet Memphis, like so. There are a lot of different options. We have to wrap. But you see why I love these ladies?
Yeah.
Please